Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. Today's video is going to be on type 3 diabetes. What is it? Is it part of the reason why your brain isn't working and your thinking and memory is foggy? All right, before we dive in, please smash that like button. Really helps the search algorithm. Put your comments down below. Let me know what's worked to help improve your brain function. All right, so let's dive in. What is type 3 diabetes? So essentially, there's some data in the literature that insulin resistance also happens not at the muscles in the body, but also in the brain. And so, in regards to type 3 diabetes, it's essentially the cells becoming numb and not being able to use glucose at the brain. And so, you have parts of the brain that essentially become starved because they're not able to use a fuel source to perform and have optimal cognitive and brain function, right? If you can't use that fuel source, these parts of the brain aren't going to function. They're going to die and they're going to have impaired performance. And so, first off, what is type 3 diabetes? So, type 1, that's insulin autoimmune condition. Typically, it's picked up when you're age 10, 11, 12. Autoimmune condition that starts when you're young and you start to destroy your immune system, does the beta cells of the pancreas that make insulin. Type 2 diabetes is where you're making plenty of insulin, and over time, the insulin's actually going up and up and up and up and up, and the cells are becoming numb and resistant to it. And part of that resistance causes more and more insulin to be produced, and you just have very high levels of you start to have higher levels of blood sugar, right? When you hit that 126 level, that's diabetes, but typically pre-diabetes starts to happen at 110. And then your insulin fasting starts to go up. So in the morning, your fasting insulin starts to get higher and higher and higher, starts to go above 10, 15, maybe even 20, because your cells are becoming so numb to insulin. Your beta cells have to overproduce tons of insulin to get the job done. It's, kind of like talking to your kids. They ignore you. You keep on increasing the volume of your voice to get a hold of them. Now you're yelling at them and they're just like, whatever, they're tuning you out, right? It's kind of like that. Your cells are basically tuning out the pancreas and the insulin in your bloodstream. Now, this is a problem because high levels of insulin can create inflammation. Insulin's also a growth factor, right? So it can cause cells to grow, a la cancer. High levels of insulin can also increase androgens in women, cause PCOS. Can also cause increase in the aromatase enzyme for men. So that's going to cause high levels of estrogen. So it can cause gynecomastia, man boobs. It can cause mood issues, right? Energy issues. Again, when you're insulin resistant, you're making a lot of fat. So you have a lot of lipogenesis going on. That sucks up a lot of energy and can make you feel really tired. So yeah, type 1, type 2. And then essentially insulin resistance at the brain level. Now your brain's starving. Those areas of the brain don't have fuel. They're not going to function well. And so we have that component, while at the same time, when your insulin is being used up and then your cells are resistant to it, insulin's also very important. The insulin degrading enzyme in your brain is also very important for cleaning up plaque in the brain. And so if you don't have insulin being used efficiently, meaning it's going to deal with all the insulin and the sugar in the body, you don't have enough of that insulin degrading enzyme. Now that plaque starts to build up. So now you have greater chance of dementia and Alzheimer's and neurological degeneration. And so that's a big problem. And so we have to, number one, get your cells more sensitive to insulin. We also have to develop other fuel sources for the brain, like using ketones, because your brain can actually use ketones pretty readily. There's a researcher out of Harvard named Dr. Veach, and he's looked at all kinds of things for ketones and brain function, and the brain can very readily use ketones. Your brain only needs a little bit of glucose, I think like 20 to 30 grams a day. It's not a ton, but if your cells start to become resistant to it, and now that fuel source is down to nothing, you're going to have problems. And so we have to, number one, get your cells more sensitive to insulin and get other fuel sources in the mix like ketones so your brain has that energy to function. So the first off is you have to get the inflammation in your body down. So it's not just get the carbohydrates, get the refined sugar in check, get the excess omega-6 and inflammatory foods, because we want to have healthy cell membranes, right? Every single cell in your body has a lipid membrane, and that membrane, the healthier it is, the better it can communicate. And so if it starts to become oxidized and become stiff, or starts to have abnormal coating on there due to inflammatory fats, excess omega-6, maybe trans fats, hydrogenated oils, this is going to make that cell membrane very unhealthy, very inflexible. So we want to have good, healthy fats. We want good proteins at every meal. And then we may have to, if we're having lots of insulin resistance, right? How do you know? You're 30 pounds overweight or more. You have fasting insulin greater than 10. You have a functional glucose tolerance where an hour or two after the meal, your blood sugar is still staying above 140, right? These are all good signs. You get really tired after meals. These are good signs that you're starting to have insulin resistance, or you already have insulin resistance. So the next thing that will eventually go is the brain, because your brain will not be able to utilize the glucose for fuel optimally. And again, glucose is kind of a dirty fuel, right? If you look at it, there's a lot of oxidative stress from glucose metabolism. There's a book, I think it's called Tripping Over the Truth by Christopherson. He talks about, cancer being a mitochondrial issue, and the fact that glucose, it's kind of like burns like diesel fuel. It kind of stinks. It's kind of, it's a messy fuel. All right. It's not clean. So fat's a much cleaner fuel. And so when you have high levels of insulin, you upregulate a lot of enzymes that are lipogenic. So lipo meaning fat, genic meaning forming. So you have a lot of forming of fat enzymes upregulated. So when you upregulate these enzymes with lots of insulin, it's really hard to burn fat for fuel. So you actually have to decrease insulin. When insulin gets lower, you start to increase enzymes like hormone-sensitive lipase and growth hormone, and that makes it easier to start burning fat for fuel. One of the things they do, I think it's a growth hormone suppression test, is they'll look at your growth hormone levels. They'll give you a bunch of glucose, and they'll see if the growth hormone levels drop. Well, it's an interesting phenomenon because we know that with higher levels of glucose, we can actually decrease growth hormone. So what about if we're eating a bunch of carbs all day, especially inflammatory, non-whole food processed carbs? Well, it's going to significantly impact having healthy hormones. So really important to keep that in the back of your mind there. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. Again, if you have metabolic issues, you have insulin resistance, you have fatigue, you have cognitive brain issues, performance issues, neurological degeneration, risk factors in your family, feel free, click down below. You can reach out to schedule the consult with myself and or my colleagues to kind of help you dive in deeper to what those root causes could be and different tests to look at your brain inflammation. I like looking at a couple of markers like picolinate and quinolinate. Those are really great markers to look at brain function. Also, do we have low magnesium levels? Do we have low B6? These are all really important nutrients for brain function and for neurotransmitter synthesis. Do we have insulin resistance, right? Some of the markers I already mentioned before, whether it's fasting insulin, functional glucose tolerance, higher A1C, all those things are very good to look at. But again, if you want to reach out, links down below. If you enjoyed the content, give me a thumbs up. Put your comments down below. Let me know what you liked. And please feel free to share it with family and friends. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Take care. Have an awesome weekend. Bye.